I want to break my fingers. And I don't want to do it alone. Hey, you want to play Celeste? It's me again. And honestly, what else did you think I was going to do?
Celeste was released on January the 25th of 2018, and if you listened carefully that day, you could hear the pained screams of gamers breaking their fingers while attempting this game's harder challenges. With all the insane inputs and fancy tricks you can pull off with Celeste's simple move system, it has a skill ceiling that is unlawfully high. Even Melee gives it a pat on the back. Besides that, it's a quality platformer with a pretty good story. In Celeste, you play as Madeline, who just really wants to climb Celeste Mountain to overcome self-doubt or something. Don't look at me, I'm not a psychiatrist. As previously mentioned, Celeste has some of the most satisfying controls in a video game. You can run, jump, climb, dash, and some other fancy tricks involving a combination of all four of them. The game can also be categorized as a collectathon due to the strawberries you can collect in each level. Although they are pretty useless as they are just a way to impress your friends and to make a better pie on the end screen. The more interesting collectibles are the crystal hearts. These are found in difficult to reach spaces in normal chapters and are awarded for completing B and C sides. Speaking of which,
In each chapter you can find a B-side tape, which unlocks a much harder and more finger-snapping version of that chapter.
complete all the B sides and you unlock the C sides,
Oh, great!
which are some of the most frustrating, nail-biting, and painful challenges in the game. Thankfully, they're only about 3 screens each, so they aren't prolonged suffering at least.
With that brief introduction out of the way, let's go through this thing chapter by chapter, like books are meant to be read.
The prologue is just a tutorial with some story beats, nothing too fancy. It introduces you to the dashing mechanic in a very stressful way, what with the bridge collapsing and all. Hopefully this gave you some warning of the stress to come. But forget about that, the game really starts in the Forsaken City. The crystal heart here is fairly simple. Just pay attention to the directions these birds are going, follow their colors on the monitor, and presto, I finally get my bug back. Wait, what are you doing? No! This is a fairly easy level with some moving blocks that can propel you at the speed of sound right into those spikes.
At least it's easy now. When you're starting out, it's going to take at least a while and quite a few deaths to get through. Unless, of course, you've played similar games.
Old Sight is when things really get moving, both story and gameplay-wise. We meet the main antagonist, known as Battleline, who is actually some sort of incarnation of depression and anxiety given form, but again, I am not a psychiatrist. The mechanics introduced in this chapter are these black dash blocks, which you can dash into and go directly through, regaining the ability to dash while doing so. The other mechanic is Battleline herself. She copies the player's movements, and if you touch her, the crystal heart requires you to abuse the dash renewing between screens here to go up the side of the building. Dash into it, and the heart is yours.
But this tea is mine.
The next chapter is the Celestial Resort, and it introduces quite a few things. Red fuzzy things that act exactly like spikes but can move around, little grass on the ground that when touched and then untouched turns into that fuzzy stuff, locked doors and keys, and finally, Mr. Oshiro going at max speed to attack the player. Seriously man, calm down, you're gonna have a stroke. The crystal heart is fairly simple, just go through this crack, backtrack to here, and you got it. Golden Ridge blew me away.
Get it? 'Cause wind?
This chapter introduces 3 of my least favorite mechanics. The bubbles, moving blocks, and wind. Honestly, this is the chapter that I generally avoid playing. Even when I did the B-sides, I left this chapter for last. The only story that really happens is Madeline's panic attack and how her new friend Theo helps her through it. Other than that, it is just you and the wind. The crystal heart here is a Super Mario Bros. 3 reference. Hold down on this out-of-place block and voila. I'm not French. The Mirror Temple is a fairly interesting area. The story beats in this chapter are about Madeline's self-doubt and other feelings trying to attack her or something?
Are you mental?
Yes.
The mechanics introduced are these red bubbles, which are at least a bit more predictable than the blue ones, which suck the life out of me. And the other things are these terrifying monsters that chase and dash into you, and blocks only smashable by said monsters. The last bit of the chapter involves you carrying crystallized Theo all the way to this eye thing. I'm not talking about any of this because I've already been called mental for mentioning the opening dialogue. The crystal hearts from this chapter forward are beyond the scope of this video as they start having far more complex setups and other requirements. Just look up a guide, I'm not IGN. The chapter after this is Reflection, which is a pretty wild ride. I'm ignoring the story before I get called mental. Again. But these feather power-ups are pretty cool. I hope they aren't used in cramped, dastardly situations. Other additions like these blocks you dash into are pretty cool. Although being flattened into a pancake isn't the most fun thing in the world. Launching off at lightning speeds is very much so. The ending section is basically a boss fight against Battleline and is cool but wasn't that hard. So after coming to terms with whatever it is, Madeline fuses with Battleline anime style and can now dash twice. Nice. Then comes the summit, the longest chapter in the normal game and the final challenge for a casual playthrough. You go back through smaller versions of every previous area, now with 2 dashes and a spike of difficulty, and make your way to the very top of the mountain, where the updrafts are incredible and the jumps are precise. Once you've finally made it past the summit, one of 2 realizations hit you. One is,
Hooray! I did it!
the other is...
That was alright, but what's next?
Hey, this is the part where you break your fingers.
So remember those B and C sides I mentioned earlier? This is where the finger snapping comes into play. The B sides are a tad bit more difficult, but are entirely doable, while the C sides are the level designers throwing their hands up and making the game entirely unfair. These levels expect the world from you, and are one of the main reasons I had to call in a specialist.
So yeah, can you do the C-sides and that one other thing since I'm lazy?
I'll give you the footage later. Oh yeah, here's the B-side.
Nail biting, finger breaking, and even toe stubbing are synonyms to Seaside. Even if you do beat these, there are also the golden strawberries that require you to do a deathless run of each previous chapter. Thanks, extremely okay games! I can't wait to suffer for 30 minutes on the wind level again, and once you finish all that plus getting every strawberry and crystal heart, you have successfully completed the base game. Oh, did I say base game?
That's right, this game has another chapter in the form of free DLC that was released a year later.
And you thought the Seasides were hard? Well, this is where you have to actively keep your hands bandaged in order to survive. These require the use of tactics so buggered that even the TV networks are less screwed up than them. Wave dashing, jump boosting, and downright absurd precision are used constantly, and on top of that, new mechanics are thrown in just for fun. These balloon fish take forever to understand. These jellyfish parachutes are deceptively annoying because they act like they've just heard the ice cream ban the second you let go. And these electrical boxes and sparks are the epitome of stupid. Everything is covered in spikes, everything is absurdly difficult, and everything from past chapters is used here. Beside the Battleline fight, but that was more of a one-off thing. Everything I said about the Seasides except for their length applies here. Farewell is just painful. And while I love Celeste as much as the next person, I can't bring myself to finish this. Which is why we have friends.
So, you finished?
It is done. You will find your assignment in the closet.
What?
I have altered the deal. Pray I do not alter it any further.
Okay. Not so bad. All I gotta do is wear this hat?
No, it's under the hat.
This deal's getting worse all the time.
Collecting every last strawberry ranges from easy and pretty fun to, I'm sorry, there was a strawberry here? While the Seasides will test your skill, the strawberries will test your brain.
I find your lack of skill disturbing.
Well, at least I have all of my face.
To be completely honest, I enjoyed nabbing all 175 of these red fruits of hatred. They were my favorite part of the game and are just in general a good addition. Though again, they don't really give you anything besides completion.
Well, after all that, I think I have a new appreciation for this game.
Sure, it's difficult in many sections, but I think that's part of the point. It's supposed to be an arduous climb. It's supposed to be absurd during Farewell. It's literally Madeline's nightmare. Difficulty doesn't make a game bad, it makes it a challenge. I may have yelled and presumably complained a lot, but it isn't because I hate the game. That's just 50 hours of frustration coming out on Celeste. From everything including the music, to the controls, to the level design. This game is great. And at a mere $20, it's a lot of bang for your buck if you'll stick with it. In fact, after all this, I went back and completed multiple of the C-sides out of admiration for the game. This game is beyond extremely okay. It's extremely good.
Well, that was the most fun I've ever had breaking my fingers, but while I wait for this to heal, I can only play games that have big buttons and large control sticks. No!